My name is J.V. Brummels. I grew up until I was 13 on a tenant farm in Cedar County, which is in the northern part of the state. And then we moved to my mother's parents' ranch in Holt County. So we were about 18 miles from Ewing and 18 miles from Clearwater. All these towns you know. Everyone knows these towns. Bartlett and Chambers. Not far from Goose Lake, if that helps anybody pinpoint the place. I live in northwest of Winside, Nebraska, another metropolis, about 2 or 3 miles. It's a good distance from town. You're out, you know, if you need a loaf of bread, you know, it's not too much of a trip to get in there and get it. You need a 6-pack of beer. You can get it in a hurry. Winside is in western Wayne County. For a living, I teach. I teach poetry and some fiction writing at Wayne State College. Then my family and I run a cattle operation, a small cattle operation. I mean, I like to teach. Don't want to be misunderstood about that. Right now, we're in the last part of the second semester, so my fondness for teaching is wearing a little thinner. But I don't think I would give it up, even if I could afford to give it up. I really do enjoy much of that. But yeah, we run cattle. Do a sort of horseback cattle operation. There have been cattle people in my family as far back as I know, and it's something we like to do, and it's something that I think we're going to continue as long as we can have some decent luck with them. I think the idea of doing disparate things is a good one. At least it has been for me. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily to anyone else. But one of the problems I thought years ago with some poets and some teachers is that they become pretty insulated and they become focused in a way. There was a time not too long ago, it seemed like any time you picked up a short story by an American writer, it was pretty much the same short story. Now, different things may have happened, but the truth was that everybody seemed to have the same house and the same suburb and the same, and it was difficult to really grab a hold of any character. Characters were not much individualized. They were more types. And I think to avoid doing that in my own writing, I've tried to become more of an individual in my life. I'm not sure it's worked, but it's been real interesting. I started writing as a kid. I didn't write much. I mean, I've heard writers talk about how they scribbled day and night, and I wasn't like that I recall, though I would fill up, you know, Big Chief tablets at school when I had time. I started seriously writing or thinking to myself as maybe being a writer in college. Got into a poetry workshop. It was amazing to think that there was a place that you could go and write poems and people would read them and respond to them. It was the thing that appealed to me the most at the time to do, and so I stayed with it through graduate school and tried to quit once or twice. I thought, this is way too much trouble. A teacher of mine, W.D. Snodgrass, said, you know, if you can do anything else, do it. And I thought, yeah, you know, what sense does that make? Later on, that began to make sense. And I really did. I tried to quit once or twice, and it would take for about a month or 6 weeks, and then I would find myself writing usually a very long poem that I could never place in a magazine, but I needed to write a guess. And so I've given up giving up. We certainly weren't a literary family. I mean, I think there were 5 or 6 books maybe in the house. I did read a lot as a kid in a country school. We got books, crates of books sent to us every 6 weeks from the Lincoln Public Libraries. And and the way the school was set up, as country schools, you know, there was a lot of downtime, so I'd fill that with reading. I think some need to express myself. I do come from an opinionated family, so I've got these opinions to express. I've got something to express that way. I think that the arts and athletics allow people to maintain their childhood well into adulthood. I mean, if you're a poet, well, I mean, you get to play, and people don't expect the same sorts of things from you that they would expect from more traditional vocations. And so I get to play, and I get to act, and I generally get to have fun.
We are a collection, a non-circulating collection of works by and about Nebraska authors, and we represent over 3,000 authors here in this collection with over 10,000 volumes. So we've got a real wonderful literary tradition here in Nebraska. And I'd invite all of you to come and visit our collection sometime during our public service hours to see really the wonderful things that we have here. But in an effort to promote these authors, the Heritage Room, along with the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association, sponsors the John H. Ames Reading Series so that we can bring the authors to their audience and then we can share with one another these great things that everybody has to write here. And I'd like to also mention that it's through an endowment fund that was brought about by the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association with the Lincoln City Libraries that we are able to be here tonight. So we really thank them for their efforts for that. And I'd like to introduce tonight J.V. Brummels. He is from Winside, Nebraska, and he's a rancher and a teacher of creative writing at Wayne State College. He received degrees from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Syracuse University in New York. And he's published quite a bit. He's published a couple books of poetry, including 614 Pearl, Clay Hills, which is this book I have right here, which is a beautiful fine press edition, and Sunday's Child. And he's also had poems published in several periodicals. And I think I'll leave it briefly at that and let him tell you more about himself with that. So let's welcome J.V.
Let's see here. Thanks for coming, folks. I want to do some new poems. Vicki told me, she looked it up, and I read here in this room 14 years ago. So I figure a guy ought to come up with some new poems in 14 years. I hope. Read here 15 years ago, too. I got about 20 pencils with John Neihart's name on them for doing that reading, if I remember right. Still got some of the pencils. Don't use those much, I guess. I'm going to warm up with some poems that are pretty new poems, pretty new, but not real new. You know, I know them a little better, so we'll give this a shot. Plain. This is a poem about, this is the entirety of the history of Euro-American civilization in Nebraska to date. Okay? Pay attention, take notes if you want. Got any questions after, or just ask them. You know, I'll fill in any blank spots. Plain. It was vast. It was round as the world. We came upon it like bathers, testing the ocean with our toes. Like children in a boneyard, looking over our shoulders for what studied our passing. There was nothing but vast roundness behind, and all of it looked. There was nothing ahead, but it was there. Each day we pushed harder into it, and it stiffened against us. Our strides shortened. One noon we sulled. The worries behind and ahead balanced and twinned. We despaired for a time, then fell to building. Careful to square the corners, we erected 2 cells, roofed them with sod, and settled in their shade. Wind blew through the bars. Rain rusted the iron. Blizzards drifted snow over our quilted knees. In the spring, neighbors neighbored. Neighborly smiles below weather-worried eyes. They talked of forming a county to line 1-0 from the next. We watched them scurry away across the plain while our pork chops fried. We ate. We talked it over. We had 2 cells. We could build more, maybe run for sheriff. Ambition drove us out to find the corners of our claims. We plowed furrows straight as bullets. We planted, prayed, and reaped a crop of barbed wire, a crown of thorns our faith fluttered on. We prosper and we fail. sun and rain, hail and hoppers, and drought and flood. Good years, we fatten on the produce of our fields. Bad years, we cast our wind-burned sight down lines scratched in the dirt. Ignore the dome of sky above the flat brims of our hats. I noticed on the way down, I want to ask you guys this, because, I mean, maybe there's some news that I'm not familiar with. Go figure that one. I mean, I'm sure in Lancaster County, when they have county elections, there actually are elections. Usually up in northern Nebraska in the small counties, you know, it's the incumbent runs. And when the incumbent quits, you know, then, you know, the incumbent to be runs. Wayne County's got, there were signs in many of the counties on the way down here, and all of them for county sheriff. And I don't know what this real interest is suddenly in being sheriff of small Nebraska, sparsely populated Nebraska counties. I'm just hoping it's not like a new wave of law and order or something. Did anybody hear anything about this? I mean, I'm all for law, order. But maybe we got just the right amount right now. So this line in here about the sheriff's always kind of bothered me, but now I think I was right about that line. All right, another one. This is a little older poem. It's called "The One or the Other." It's in 13 parts. I ripped off the form from Wallace Stevens' 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, except I did more with it. I mean, I've got longer parts than he had. Some of you don't know Wallace Stevens' 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. It's pretty fascinating. It's, well, let's see. I was of two minds, like a tree in which there are two blackbirds. That's one part. You got to think about that one for a while, don't you? Let's see. A man and a woman are one. A man and a woman and a blackbird are one. Whew. Kind of blows me away. I've always been impressed with that poem, so I kind of did one in 13 parts. It's not 13 ways of looking at anything, but it does have 13 parts. It's called The One or the Other, which of course would only be 2 parts. The one or the other, one. It's warm enough for rain or cold enough to snow. It's show up late for work or speed on ice. It's strap on a belt or keep it coiled. It's good tracking on a bad spot, hold her straight, or it's the ass end coming around gaining on you. Through the windshield, the measured pan of your life's country, the truck you see or you don't see, the leg shivering adrenaline or of another near miss, or the audible snap of the bones in your neck. 2. It's the ice and snow that kills you, but by funeral afternoon, it's gallons of runoff rilling down Cemetery Hill. It's life and death in a pulse of weather. It's live or die, and of course, it's both. 3. It's go hard on short, cold days and sit long by the stove on these dark as night nights. Or it's just rest in Grandma Ida's rocker and try to stare the weather down, cloudy or clear. It's either get up and move around or get sucked into the fire. 4. Dad's bringing Ruby down to the sail ring on Saturday. He says she ain't good for nothing anymore but only for the French to eat. It's keep her around for nothing or sell her for what I can get. It's the one or the other. What was once a pretty roan filly will be hanging tendon-hooked meat by the first of the week. 5. Dad's late or I'm early. Either way, I have time to scout the pens. Kim's buying tack before running up to the gun show to find a holster. It was his old bird guns or a .357, and along his share of the river, they've had some shooting scrapes. It's scattershot or revolvers, guns or knives, stones or clubs. The ridges of my country's repopulated with cracker meat packers come north to work the new plants. Still, a few months of finding strangers, I know it's follow the work or go hungry. Still, a few months of finding strangers where friends used to live, of cut line fences, of road signs tattooed with a 40-round clip, one time or two of coming out of bed all at once with late-night headlights raking the house. It's got me thinking it's the one fear or the other. 6. My wife's Uncle Burdett's in ill health, bones too brittle to fall down on, his voice too feeble to carry 2 feet. So Aunt Viola belled him for emergencies with a whistle. He blows it now at family get-togethers just to get her goat. It's either that or sit on his hands. 7. This is the place to buy or sell, and I've brought nothing to rid myself of. I sit on my hands a while. At the chutes, Dad's unloading Ruby late because in the 13 years they've run that horse, no one's thought to trailer break her. She had to be roped in against her will. Either that or let her run the river till natural causes took her, the whore. Oh, she's a whore of the Elkhorn Valley, all right, a hell bitch who broke my brother's arm and nose, who piled me into the river. 8. I've neighbored a few whores. Sat a horse on my own range and watched the Johns arrive in cars stripped of plates. The kids, only a little younger, hunker in the side yard around trash fires while their mothers play for pay. 9. Everything has its price, they say. Maybe this is my native tongue, the amplified litany of Hegel, my priest, the auctioneer. 10. Or, before matter breathed, only energy awaiting a name roamed the void, and all enhancement trailing it down through time is only riffs on that profound groan. 11. Or, the way it was to start, the prophet says, it's going to be again. Here, then, is prophecy for us all. The swinging dick of rhythm makes its natural way back down to the single attenuated syllable of yip, the bitters doing business. Even a great poem's blue sky arching shout falls to the rocks. Past the high tide of human speech, a mute community waits. 12. Only principle devolves to choice. It's the one or the other. To live or to die, to whore or to love, my dad's limp toward me or my son's quick run away. To be struck dumb or blow a whistle. My folks' tongue or the speech of strangers, to sit on my hands or grunt a nonsense bid. 13. What the hell? I choose the last of a string of tall colts, a gray. I give the man my number and my money. I take my chances on a horse I name Red Jack. Thank you. God, it goes on forever, doesn't it? I wondered, this is Mark Sanders did these poems in this little book, The Plain Sense of Things, The Plain Sense of Things. 8 poets from outstate Nebraska. My division chair saw this. And he said, what's outstate Nebraska? I said, what is outstate Nebraska? Everything but Omaha and Lincoln? I've still got to give him an answer. He's waiting. I mean, if you're outstate Nebraska, is that like, this would be in-state then, I guess? All right. I guess. I don't know. He wants to know. I've got to come up with some kind of answer. There's a second one out. I don't know if it's out or not, but it is out, and that is 8 Lincoln poets, I believe. And I'm looking forward to seeing that. Suncatchers. Field of sunflowers at dawn. Once before sunup, I saw a million flowers in carefully farmered rows. Each cup turned to face the east, where a yellow line traced a shaded ridge. I swear that when the sun peeked over that windless morning, each flower sighed. Now, after a summer of searching out the shade, I sit on the house's evening side to watch the ash trees up the slope catch in their highest reach the last of a day already done. Some have stretched wider around, and another has split its trunk slingshot-like to flank the lesser trees. And as the world runs its course, we each are only the same as these, grasping beans, racing to hold the last of the light in our leaves. Next poem is called Different Weathers. Nebraska's got the best weather in the universe 6 days a year. Right? Or 4, 3, on the average, maybe 6. Or maybe the weather's so awful most of the time that when you get a good day, it's like, yeah, this is great. Different weathers. January 23rd, this is a couple of years ago, it was 66 degrees. And I know down in southern Nebraska, 66 degrees in January doesn't impress anybody, but up north, we're pretty thankful when that shows up. There's another thing in this poem. A friend of mine for years deconstructed
barns and hog houses and sheds, and he would talk about the number of whiskey bottles he would find hidden away. You know, you didn't drink in the house. You know, you'd go out to the barn and drink. And I think that's a really fine tradition. I mean, I'm not sure about not drinking in the house, but it's good to have a drink in the barn once in a while. Just no, I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be the one or the other. Different weathers. Let's see here. Yeah. January 23rd, 66 degrees. The neighbor and I sit in front of the west barn on busted chairs, long exiled from the kitchen. We imagine other generations with jugs of aging barn whiskey. More shed than barn, I guess, though its incarnations, clear to the experienced eye, are barn. Horse, calf, milk, though never hog, thank God. Now it's a saddle shed, so I guess it's shed whiskey. If I could find a place with weather like this, I say, I'd pack up and move there. Everyone back from the bowl game in Arizona says, the weather's great. Clear, they say, and, well, there's smog above in the dying turquoise sky and the wafting vapors of passengers speeding by, thirsting for better weathers.
I write about my own life. Sometimes it's thinly veiled, and sometimes maybe it's thickly veiled. I think I'll read tonight part of a short story that comes out of my life. The guy who's speaking in that story isn't me, but I share enough with him that I think I did a good job with the story and with developing that character. I write about what I do. I find that I don't often write about teaching, but I do find that I write about horses and cattle and kids and places. Yeah, I never really thought of the subjects. Don't know what they are. I'll have to take a survey. Nebraska has more. It's not that it's had an impact so much on my writing. It's a part of me. I mean, I'm a Nebraskan. I mean, that's accidental or whatever, an accident of birth, perhaps, but that means certain things. I mean, I like Nebraska. I'm interested intellectually in what this culture is going to be. You know, right now, I mean, we run to football games because that we can identify with that. We know what we're after here. We're going to win. We're Nebraskans, but of course Nebraska's a lot more. It's a post-Civil War culture. It's the first state admitted to the Union after the Civil War. It's the site of, or next to the sites of, the Great Plains Indian battles in the country. Longest war the country ever was in. We're still working out our identity here. Occasionally, you don't have to go too far, it seems to me. Or if you look around a little bit and you'll see, somebody, a joke or a TV show, and somebody will write down Nowhere, Nebraska. It's this place that doesn't really have its identity set yet, and I'm real interested in helping set what that identity is.
I'm pretty mechanically oriented. I got this thesis binder. I had it around for 10 or 15 years. Never could figure out how to work it. Finally, I went to put some poems in there, and I, had to hire a guy to come in and help me with it. Of course, I didn't do it right, so I don't know. The margins are kind of screwed up, and I'm gonna get a how-to book on this sometime. Just how to put a manuscript in a thesis or one of these deals here. Oh, December rain. December rain. It is the end of the 20th century, and they argue over nothing over the noon meal in a restaurant. The words of all arguments drift high, white, and cold against their hearts. They can't recall their dreams. She hopes to explain and is cut short. To save his heart, he must stop, and so spits out his tongue. In the sudden quiet, they can only stare. Tongue is not a very pretty thing, worse there served up on a plate than in the mouth. After time, he eats around it and finds his taste no worse than before. What's more, he manages please and thank you. Gestures convey the rest. What he can't express is the rock of an idea or the gentle shower of unsubstantial talk. No matter. The drum that is his heart beats against his ribs, fills his chest like a basketball crowd jams a high school gym. The rock that is his heart is the beat of the rain on the roof, drowning all the tired voices ever raised against it. Want to know about heaven? I got one. I got one about heaven. The afterlife. Started out pretty good, you know. Now, I don't know, heaven, hell, I'm not quite sure where this one ends up, but it's got horses in it, though. The afterlife. For you, eternity begins well. You're hand-tooled down to the inlaid silver of the rowels of your spurs. You've the legs and wind of a 20-year-old, and the horse is the best of each you knew in life sinewed together. Though the distance between stars is greater than any measure, you've all the time there was or ever will be. The stars you knew in life don't hold a candle to these. 1,000 blazing constellations hold the postures of anything or anyone you care to recall. Within their range, honey light flows. Between there is only velvet coolness and the wind you make in passing. The only sounds, the sawing of breath and the hollow hammer of hoofs against the void, construct a plain out of the nothing. The slope of a long hill leads you to a creek. You believe neither you nor the horse need water, but the pleasure of drinking remains. Here you have the first of your eternal doubts. Is it better to launch back into the void? Some thought of society beyond the horse draws you down. You mount and ride on, keep to the grass, spiral only between moonlight and sun. Little houses, lined like so many happy faces, prosperous merchants and their matronly women wave you over or on, you can't be sure. They are strangers, changed from any people you maybe once knew. The horse sidesteps, and you loosen his rein and pass on. Desert. But nothing you fear. You long for nothing left behind. The horse surprises you, tires, can't now launch out over the hard pan. You must cross on the flat. The grease of him melts away. You walk beside him, your silent tongue growing in your mouth. You think to cut his throat, then your own. Still, you're already dead. You grieve that what seems true of you might not be for him. Between one step and the next, he shivers, groans, and dies. The wind blows sand that sticks to your sweated shirt and chaps. You fan away the flies from his eyes with your hat. You wait, you thin and dry and stretch. You are more sand than flesh. You thirst though you needn't drink. The horse is hide over bones, then bones. Sand abrades the bones to dust. You stand to walk toward the skyline where mountains are just now lifting through the dry crust. You arrive. A half-dozen false-fronted buildings scoured to splinters by sand. And a few maimed pilgrims. Their face is your face, but few mention the wear and tear of death, pointless as it is rude. There is only the town, the dead, you among them, the mountains, and the insistent rumor of a better place on the far side. Yeah, thanks, Jim. Face, birthday poem. I used to think, I heard that owls were a bad sign. If you saw owls, that was something bad was going to happen. And that worried me for years. I also thought that about crows. I kept seeing a lot of crows, and I thought that's a lot of bad sign. So finally I decided that crows and owls are good signs. And I've been much happier since. I recommend this to you as a way of dealing with them. Let's see if there's anything I need to say in particular about this face. I tell time by counting spotted calves, by the draw of the windmill's sucker rod, the pulsed gush of water out the spout into the stock tank. Birthday. Yesterday, I watched the same Western twice. Stylized quick draws at the first chime of the town clock, its face round below the disk of desert sun. All those 45s blazing away. Big bores, those pistolas, finally. And I'm bored with 44. It's high noon as we drive the trace towards home and dinner. An owl splits the tall grass to the left, and I stand on the brakes knowing it's useless and that she's too near. Still, she rises on our right and wafts off high into the north wind into a July sky that just as well be desert. A good sign, this resurrected owl, its face round as a clock. 12 hours later, I'm still celebrating. Sleepy, well-fed and watered. I take a last drink and get a few minutes alone to click the TV around the dial and find that one guy interviewing an architect for a whole hour on the occasion of his 90th birthday. A sign, I think. This little man with his round glasses on his round face, only just above the big round table, just twice my age. Interesting fella. But I can't fight sleep. I can fight sleep only for just so long, and sign or not, I shut him off early and rise to go to bed to rise early tomorrow. I set my glass on the counter, face the kitchen clock one last time, and find the hour just half past. Fine arts. Fine arts. Not sure what they are. Attempt at a jazz poem. Who was it that said if you have to ask what jazz is, you'll never know? Anybody? Louis Armstrong? I don't know. That's in here someplace. Unattributed. Fine arts. I learned this years ago. Always check to see if the second page is there. All right, fine arts. I'm standing in the door of the barn tonight listening to jazz. I don't understand jazz, and I could walk to the radio and change the station, but I don't. The stars are out, and the moon will rise soon. I'm drinking beer and listening to jazz. I'm thinking we're all jazz. As soon as someone wants to understand, we're misunderstood. It's rhythm, or what passes for rhythm. It's jazz, and I'm standing in the door looking out and up. I think it's a matter of shirts. At this moment, 1,000 American lit students in libraries, dorm rooms, on busted Davenports, and overpriced tenements are reading Daisy, seduced by Gatsby's shirts, gold and silver shirts flung about the room. The students want to understand, but Gatsby's misunderstood. Daisy's misunderstood. Their teachers have told them it's the jazz age, but the teachers have misunderstood. I'm standing in the door of the barn listening. Beneath the stars, a colt lifts his muzzle and whinnies like an angel's horn. Colts and fillies are misunderstood, unknown, more so than horses, that already are more or less what they will always be, star or barn. We don't yet understand colts. Colts are still largely unknown, still largely to be, like a shirt that's not been worn. Down 100 halls, grown men will walk tomorrow with sheaves of papers and books stacked against their hips, wondering, is this a fit profession for a grown man? Wondering, should have I stuck with basketball or the service? They'd be colonels or sergeants and retired long ago on good pensions, or at least coaches, or stayed with the trumpet or sax. Right now, they'd be standing on a stage in a smoky club playing their angel horns to young women of adventuresome spirit. A friend wrote that her colleague, a gentleman of open gender, has disappeared. What drama? Here, hardly anyone disappears. I'm drinking beer, thinking of the coming winter. I am thinking of the coming winter's poker games, how cards is an education. No, how winter is an education and cards just the text we studied. How that more than understand, we want to experience the endlessly various rifts. And I'm thinking, I'm around too many young women of adventuresome spirit. And I'm thinking, a farmer recreates the old country, but a rancher is a Native American who recreates what he's seen on a movie screen. And I'm thinking of the jack of spades cut from a fresh deck and a few new dimes and some old nickels, quarters bright as asters, halves and greenbacks stitched across a dark oilcloth. I'm drinking beer, standing in the door of the barn, listening to jazz, listening to the colts whinny and snort like a heavenly host. I'm looking up at the stars, bright as new dimes, when the moon rises like a hole card. I think I understand when the moon rises. Misunderstood. Thank you.
Books are heavy. Books are a heavy responsibility in some ways. Logan House is a small press that I put together with a couple of partners, Gilbert Vaughn and Jim Reese. We've done 3 titles so far, 2 chapbooks of poetry, one by Red Shuttleworth. All of these bullets, separate as nuns, eager as Renoza whores. And we did a chapbook of poems by Neil Harrison called Story. And we've also done a collection of short fiction by Nebraskans called Here From There. Books are heavy. You know, I've gotten a lot from writing. I've enjoyed it. It's fed me. It's, you know, literally fed me. I mean, my teaching job comes from my record as a writer. It's important to do something for the art that's feeding you other than just to live off of it. So, yeah, I want to do books by other people. I like to sponsor readings. I like to do a magazine now and again. I think it's important. For years I thought, you know, there's just too much poetry. Nobody can pay attention because they can't sort through it all. They can't figure out what's out there. The truth of it is there's not enough poetry. What we need are more poets and more readings and more magazines and more books and more poets. I changed my opinion because I saw the truth. I was mistaken earlier. Now I know what the facts are, and the facts are that we need more poets. Poetry feeds the spirit. It feeds the spirit of the people who write poems. If it works right, it feeds the spirit of the people who read the poems. And I haven't heard anyone yet suggest that feeding the spirit was a bad thing. So let's have more poets.
I write about birds. Owls seem to be showing up a lot lately. This is a gift of the gift of another anniversary, and for years I didn't know what was making these weird noises out in the trees. Screech owls, very odd sounding, like, you know, like babies crying or something like that. And finally somebody told me what it was, and I could relax again. You know, I worry about things like that. Let's see. The gift of another anniversary. Daylight savings times, a rose on the ridge, and still I puzzle out a little love speech. A baldy calf, 2 weeks old, noses close, unblinking in the face of my American harangue, curiosity constant in the species. Curious, too, about the chance of a common tongue, I try the German. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Out of the west, the banshees reply. I ask again to be sure. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? 8 or 2 talk it over in the head of a tree, then fall like a wind along the draw to the east. A cold spit of rain follows them down. Calves have gathered like children in school. I tell them what they already know. Sprechen Sie all. This is a poem called Golden. It's a little longer. My folks celebrated their 50th anniversary 2 years ago. Yeah. And 2 years ago, last fall. And I suppose if I'd have been energetic, I would have written this for them at the time. But I was lazy. Didn't get it written until last year. Golden. Mama was a beauty, still is. And Daddy was a G.I. Joe, a dog face so country fried they called him Broomcorn, the only nickname he ever earned. Mama was a beauty, still is. This photo, made at graduation, shows how lovely and dark. That's the surprise. But see, this one made the winter of her birth, her young parents gathered around her. How dark they are, how old world they seem. Grandpa Ed's hair piled high before his cap, Grandma Ann small beside him. Though they spoke the German, they looked somehow French. And who's to say they didn't stem from some borderline folk? All those Wyrick girls were beauties, still are, Aunt Jeanette tells me. And Frances was the sweetest girl in all the world. Jeanette and all of Daddy's people run to redheads and blondes. Daddy was Mama's old man's hired man for a while. Who would have him, she once thought, but soon she couldn't if she wanted. Jeanette tells what Grandma Ida saw. Mom woke. She'd seen Vernie in her dreams. He cried and cried and cried. That would have been August of '42. How short the corn stood on the hills, spare the grass, and how the hot wind seared Nebraska. You see, they had him for 7 months and then would not give him leave to come home before going over there to England and on to North Africa and on to Anzio Beach Head and then up the boot. They had him for the duration. On the home front, crops and cattle and winters and wind, years terrible to endure. Mama was a beauty, still is. Did it seem it wasn't meant to be? How she kept in that clanging din of that wartime railroad job, the coal smoke of locomotives, the changing geographies of news from the front, the drone of fireside chats, that rosebud beauty I'll never know, but only suppose it had to do with the patience not to note much the seasons, a sort of holding still till the world turned right again and set her back down where she was supposed to be. And how did it end? For Daddy, so far up in the Italian Alps, the world's most modern army packed its ammunition on mules. Below a town, a monastery, and far up a path, a German officer walking nearer and nearer, holding a white bedsheet, like some great broken kite. Some great tear in his world began to mend. How strange, after so long a going away, was that first step towards home. Would they be strangers to each other? The man who had traveled 4 continents and that River City woman? It was August of '45, the corn short on the hills and the grass spare. Mama, a beauty still, and Daddy come home whole, an end to 1,000 days enduring, and what world had hung in the balance? Why, this one. Neither ending nor beginning. The long flat behind the church in Clearwater always stretches away to the west. This is anniversary. This is open house. This is the slant of sun of this October Sunday afternoon, always slanting. Aunt Jeanette tells me Grandma Ida's dream. They are all here, or nearly all. The Wyrick women, beauties still, smile brilliantly. A handful of old soldiers march from handshake to handshake, smiling at their luck. Grandchildren are thick as grass and, oddly, blonde and red as the ridges beyond the flat. Daddy will say again he's the luckiest man in the world. Mama, a beauty still, and dark among her plain, fair children, smiles not, I think, at luck, but that old friend, Faith, who told her this new world would come to be. Thank you. Try something simpler. Grand Tetons. Grand Tetons. So named by a sex-starved French trapper, I've been told and always believed, though today I think I might have been deceived. There were women there, women who knew Earth to be their mother, another woman. So today, the hill I always view out my window I see is a woman's breast, and in a sudden dream of what that trapper must have felt, I know that for a moment a lucky little man could reach out and hold it in his hand. Horsebreaker. This is for my friend Henry Shane Miller. A guy named Henry Shane Miller is likely to grow up around horses and stay with it, I suppose. Horsebreaker. I've been lucky. I've had a hand in making a few good horses, and I've been unlucky. I've had a hand in making some real knotheads. Anybody wants to buy a horse? Got one that's really a pretty good horse. It just needs a little work, you know. Miles and hours, hours and miles. Horsebreaker. His mouth is raw from Copenhagen, raw as the quick nerve of the colt facing him, raw like he's been eating the sand the colt stands in, nearly hock deep. He's up to his neck in debt himself for horses and pickups, the births of children. The schooling he can't make use of lies scattered behind him like pieces of rotten tack. Here and now, on this place back beyond the border of nowhere, there is only the wind and noon heat, flies and sweat, and past the flat line cut by his hat brim, a wall-eyed colt tensed to see what happens next. Thank you. Thanks. Let me ask you. Stand on the end of a 3-horse saw. I think that's how they're rated. I think it's a 3-horsepower saw. If I'm way off on this, I wish somebody would tell me so I could get this thing, you know, fix this thing up. 3-horsepower saw. Let me ask you. Stand on the end of a 3-horse saw for a couple of chilly, overcast evening hours. What does your mind turn to? I think of a girl pretty as a length of young cottonwood, pale bark stippled with rain. What do you do with such a thought? When the chain jumps from the bar, I turn and see my neighbor winding his way through the hillocks of bunch grass. Is his path like that of a brown feather from a high roost falling through the crossing drafts of the coop after you open the door on a windy day? When I flip the toggle switch, is the quiet as sudden as when you step in off a busy weekday street into church? The wind's in the top of the grove. Fat raindrops plop on my hat brim with the irregular rhythm of a horse building a pile of road apples. Sitting on the tailgate of the pickup, what do you and your neighbor talk about? The talky nerves you get from closing weather? Your soul, that mainspring of a cheap watch, strained past where it keeps the right time but not running down? Do you say, you know you're crazier each year, but hope it's better crazy? How do you end these conversations? We get up and go to supper, after a ways stopping each to lift his palm to the other. Alone, under the trees in the fall, when life is chilled, you see the still, full heads of the trees nodding in the wind. Are they beautiful young women laughing? I stand a long time wondering, the minutes dropping around me like rain.
I encourage students by expecting them to write, and I suppose demanding that they write. When I do a poetry workshop, I see a poem from each student every week, and I try to find what I like in that poem. I try to say what I like in that poem, and I try to encourage that. It's really easy. We're sort of critical. People are very critical, and it's real easy to find out say what's wrong with a poem or with anything. It's not so easy to say what's right. A poetry workshop gives a student poet an audience for her work or his work. And that, in my experience has been that those workshops tend to be pretty appreciative audiences. I'm not there really to tell a student how to write a poem. A student's going to write a poem that's individual expression. Individuality ought to be prized. And if I say to the student, look, you're saying it the wrong way, say it as I would say it, that's a disservice to the student. The student needs to be told to say it the way she or he wants to say it. A lot of applause, pat on the back, some encouragement, and, publish a magazine, put the students' work in there. Do what you can for them. No, I want to keep writing poems, and right now that's what I'm really in love with. Again, and I want to keep. I've had a pretty good couple of years with them, and I want to just keep writing poems and writing poems and writing poems. I do have a couple, 3 ideas for more novels, but novels are so much work. It's such a sustained effort, and I can imagine doing them, but I can't imagine doing them tomorrow. Well, I hope that if I do the poems and the stories well, that'll feed the spirit of those readers. And then if I'm doing it well, I hope to be able to just sort of pitch it at them with a pitchfork, you know, and just keep it in front of them and you know, fatten their little spirits up until they're ready for. Oh, I'm sorry, that's about enough of that. Metaphor just went to heck.
The night after the Emmys. No, I'm sorry, I messed it up too. It's the Grammys. Try the Grammys. You know, Emmys, Grammys, Oscar. That one sounds different. You know. The night after the Grammys. I started a series of bar poems. I've only got the one so far, but I intend to get a few more going. As soon as my teaching schedule lets up a little bit, I'm ask for some, maybe my school will give me some time off from teaching so I can do a series of bar poems. I'll write it up, you never know. Oh, the night after the Grammys. This is Windside. Shelley's Saloon is in Windside. I recommend everybody after the reading, you want to go up, we'll go to Shelley's. I'll buy the first round. Nice little small town tavern. I'm sitting at the end of the bar. I came in to get a six-pack to go, but the Prairie States finals are on the TV above me. I've got no place I have to be. I'm drinking a beer. Two young welders sit farther up the bar, the only other customers getting drunk. They've loaded up the jukebox. Some of the music I like. Some gives me a headache, and some of the music won Grammys last night. I can't hear the TV, but mostly I watch the horses of the pickup men anyway. Beautiful, big, patient cold-bloods, a Dunn and a Palomino, who do their jobs without a fuss. The matchbook in my hand reads, "Thank you," and "Dallas and Marcy," and "Shelley's Saloon," and "Windside, Nebraska," and "Close cover," and "Strike on back." I don't want another beer. Day after tomorrow, I have to be at my Uncle Martin's funeral. The bull riding's on the TV, and I don't like the bulls. The juke runs out of change. The welders, too drunk to note the quiet, yell to the empty saloon about getting high. I think Grammy and Martin and Marcy. The sounds make a hum in the hanging silence. Yeah. Let's see. I think I'm getting down to... Running with Dogs. There's a little magazine in Lincoln, I think, called Prairie Schooner. There's a wonderful literary journal called Prairie Schooner in Lincoln, published out of Lincoln. Most of you know that. This poem's just published. Running with Dogs. There's a little bit in here about my son, well, there's actually quite a bit about my son's teeth. He's got these sort of canine, and his mother decided it was time to, you know, a couple, 3 years ago to go get the braces. You know, like all the other kids in his class, it's time to get the braces. And so I took him, and we went down, and we sat there, and, you know, and this guy looked at his mouth and said, "Oh, yes, yes, look at this. Oh, yes, braces." And I'm like, I said, "Hey, kid, you know, afterwards, I said, you know, maybe you ought to get braces. I mean, what the heck? You know, we'll pay for them. It's not like it's coming out of your pocket." And he says, "Oh, I don't know." I said, "Oh, look, I said, you know, just weigh the advantages and disadvantages." And he said, "The disadvantage is that it ruined my high school years, and, and the advantage would be I'd have a career as a male model, maybe." Well, we're still several $1,000s richer. I don't know about richer, but good kid, good kid. Running with Dogs. In the dark of the late March new moon, the coyotes form a yipping circle, closing in. In front of the house, the year-old dog barks. A coyote close and brave enough, though neither big nor dog-throated, answers in the call he has learned, a high echo. Today, I found a rooster pheasant, its soft underside licked clean, red as his head, not 50 yards from the front door. They've come in close to find something for the new pups. I take to running with the dog, his steel chain clinking against my only trophy buckle. I run in my boots in the dark. Yellow dogs on the range witness our passing. I think of all the dogs I've run with, some running buddies who are real sons of bitches, dead now, or in the prisons of cheap house trailers counting the clicks of cylinders revolving while the TV blares nonsense. I think of dog soldiers, those plainsmen who nailed themselves in place in the face of their enemy, scared of nothing. I think of my son's palate, muzzle-like in shape, the canines pronounced like some new breed. The dog snaps at the night. We three are the wolves of the world, subject only to the waxing moon and the constant stars that flank our running shadows into the dark. And, yes, thank you. A couple more. Young bulls. This is for my brother, my older brother, and I kept thinking I ought to call it old bulls, you know. Oh, no, we're still young. Young bulls. The sun rises from behind the muscle of earth, peeks over my right shoulder, and I'm young with the day. What resurrection to climb again into the light, aback a good horse, a little mare on a long lead trailing behind like a tethered moon. If I were a preacher, I'd take this morning for my text. These willows around the spring below me dipped in hoarfrost, this horse breath visible to any but the eye which will not see. Instead, I'm a single horseman chousing black cows off the tan scrub of fall pasture. Settles is the word of the husbandman, as in, that young bull might not settle many cows. A notion more to do with youth than place, the motions of life than fixity of the grave. I rein in at the apex of this high hill, the crest of all movement and moment my eye surveys. And I'm going to finish with this one. It's my most recent poem. It's called Buffalo Woman. It's dead serious. We started calving March 15th. We're still calving. Great deal of fun. We've had probably a couple feet of snow and, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 8 inches of rain and tons of mud since we started. If we'd have done it in February, you know, it'd all be done. The weather was good, but no, not us. Yeah, do it late when it's safer. Anyway, so calving, mud, you know, just Buffalo Woman. Once, in a herd of 100 million bison, lived a young cow of adventuresome spirit. All she knew of the universe was the herd. Those old cows and bulls grazing near her knew of the universe only the herd. The young bulls knew only fight and breed. The calves and yearlings knew even less. Stronger than the habit of grazing south only to swap ends once a year and graze north, stronger even than the urge to lift her tail to flag the snorting, slobbering, panting, pawing bulls to enliven a slow, dusty summer day, was her curiosity. She needed to know about what lay at the edge of civilization. She began with a single sideways step to sidle out of the herd. Now, once and for millennia, when the herd grazed, they devoured the entirety of the leafage of our maps. Nevertheless, the young cow persevered, and one day, almost 2 years later, in the moon we call March, she showed up at the fence outside my bunkhouse. I was just dragging another dead calf around the corner to drag off farther the next morning when I spied her in the dark, leaning against the slack strands of barbed wire. I invited her in. But calving was all I'd been doing and all I had to talk about, and she'd been raised with an entire history of calving and didn't care to hear more. When I started one more story, she blew snot out of her nose and spilled most of the balance of the bottle of schnapps we'd been passing back and forth. She said, and I quote, "All that is a pie of self-important bullshit, and I've smelled all I want to smell. You men think it all has to do with you. Now let me tell you something." But she couldn't tell me nothing about living in a herd and imagining another universe that I didn't already know. The last I remember before passing out in the bunk was her swinging that massive head and licking her nostril. When I woke up, there was only the dead calf, a stretched and broken barbed wire fence, and the questions I wish we'd thought to ask. Thank you.